Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you walk into your office cafeteria every single day, and the person serving you food doesn't just see your face, they see everything under the surface. I mean, the fight you had this morning, the quiet desperation you're carrying, the exact weight of your unresolved anxieties. Today, our source material is this really intense psychological deep dive into the life of a man named Eli. He's a cook at a textile factory canteen. And he is not just making soup, he's acting as an involuntary witness to the interior lives of 300 women every day.
And what's so fascinating here is that we're basically treating this whole narrative like a detailed, decades-long case study. Our mission is to really dissect the profound and often destructive cost of radical openness. Specifically, why the very quality that makes people drawn to someone, that absence of agenda, that perfect presence, becomes the catalyst for devastating conflict in our most intimate relationships.
So, this deep dive is, in a way, a masterclass in empathy management and attachment dynamics. We're going to trace a repeating pattern through Eli's major relationships, analyze some surprising failures, and then examine this huge, life-changing reversal that completely reframes the entire story. Eli's journey, it really gives you a clear look at that dangerous boundary between giving freely and simply being, but without any boundaries at all. So Eli is introduced as this man whose whole existence is just profoundly permeable. He hears the factory starting up, and the source describes the sound as indistinguishable from his own breathing. But for all his sensitivity, he was grounded, fundamentally loving. The source makes a point of this right up front. Love had never been his problem. He was totally capable of connection.
That's a critical point. His capacity for love was absolute, but his nature was profoundly porous. He had almost no emotional filter. Eli sees under things. He sees the exact moment a woman realizes she'll never leave her small town, or the subtle signs that a husband had been abusive again. This seeing, the text notes, have no edges. Other people's interiors are just continuous with his own.
Wow. Okay, so when you say continuous with his own, is he just an extreme empath, or is he actually experiencing their pain? And where did that even come from?
It's more than empathy. It's more like emotional immersion. His system registers their distress as his own distress, instantly, fully. And the text traces this all the way back to age 7. His father left without a word. That event, it forced Eli to develop this witness self, a mechanism to just observe and understand his environment so he could survive. He started to feel that to be always watching is to never be fully immersed. He was perpetually separate, but completely saturated.
That sounds absolutely exhausting. How do you keep that up without burning out?
Exactly. And for a long time, he didn't know how. He found a kind of philosophical coping mechanism later in life. He started seeking out spiritual texts that offered a way to manage the constant inflow. The relief came from this one idea. You are not the one who feels. You are the space in which feeling arises. That framing, it allowed him to witness all that pain without identifying with it, without drowning in it. It gave him spaciousness.
But that very spaciousness, that acceptance, is what creates the core conflict, right? If he has no agenda, no desire to control, he becomes the perfect blank slate. Women are drawn to his absence of agenda. They see this peaceful space and they mistake it for an invitation, or even worse, for salvation.
That is the psychological trap, 100%. They come to him wounded, seeing him as a safe harbor, the one person who won't ask for anything back. But they mistake his boundless presence for a boundless capacity just for them. So they try to possess him. They try to shrink him down to the size of their specific needs, and they demand boundaries that he fundamentally cannot create.
And when he resists that, just by continuing to be his full self, the whole dynamic just collapses.
It absolutely does.
Good.
The love curdled into something else. The source says sweetness turned to poison. And this cycle repeats, precisely because Eli is unwilling to close down, and they are unwilling to accept the freedom his openness represents.
Okay, so let's see this cycle play out. First with Anna. This was Eli's first significant relationship. She recognized his difference immediately, but that recognition pretty quickly turned into a fight for control.
Right. Anna couldn't tolerate the idea that the intense presence he offered her wasn't exclusively hers. She told him, straight up, "You give the same thing to everyone. How is it special if everyone gets it?" She wanted to be the only one, the keeper of the key.
So it sounds like she was asking him to choose her, but what she was really asking him to do was compromise his own structural integrity.
Precisely. And the pressure, it spurred this intense possessive rage. Her desire to own his presence was so absolute that it culminated in her throwing a plate at the wall. It's just a perfect physical manifestation of that psychological fracturing. The relationship ended right there. They wanted friction, they wanted to feel themselves landing somewhere. But Eli only offered infinity.
But hang on, let me just challenge this for a second. Is Eli's refusal to close down just a sophisticated excuse for, I don't know, emotional avoidance? Or a fear of real commitment? Couldn't he have just offered a more palatable version of himself? One that prioritized his partner?
That is a fair question. It's what we often ask of people who seem pathologically open. But the source material is adamant on this point. For Eli, it wasn't a choice. It was his operating system. If he had performed a closed-off self, he wouldn't have been Eli. He would have been a lie. His inability to ration his presence was the very thing that made him capable of seeing people like Anna and Mira in the first place.
Yeah.
You can't have the benefit without the consequence.
Okay, that clarifies his internal constraint. So then we meet Mira, a new factory worker. She also sensed his difference, but she seemed, I don't know, less aggressive about possessing him at first. An older cook, Magda, saw it so clearly. She said of Eli, "Some men are strange because something is broken. Him, something is too whole."
Mira was drawn to that wholeness. She struggled with this profound loneliness, and she felt seen by him. She told Eli, "I feel like you've just walked into my house and opened all the drawers." She craved that profound knowing. But the pressure of being known, combined with her loneliness, it led her right back to the same pattern.
She couldn't handle the fact that those drawers stayed open for the whole world to see.
Exactly. She demanded he close some doors for her sake. And Eli's response was the same as it had always been: refusal. He said he couldn't dim myself, explaining, "If I close myself to them, I close myself to you too. It's all or nothing." So the paradox remains unbroken. The very authenticity that attracts her is what ends up destroying the relationship.
So if Anna and Mira showed us the predictable pattern of rejection and rage, the source material then introduces someone who seemed to be fighting that same pattern right alongside him, and that was Lucia.
Lucia was different. She was in her mid-40s, had built this elaborate wall of self-sufficiency after her husband died. And she was already doing the psychological work. She wasn't grasping at him immediately. The text calls her a fellow traveler who was trying to figure out what to do with the cracking from her own painful self-awakening.
And crucially, she brought a psychological vocabulary to the relationship. Her therapist had already identified her as having anxious attachment. For you listening, if you're familiar with that term, you know what this looks like in daily life.
Right. Anxious attachment is defined by this deep fear of abandonment. It manifests as a compulsive need for reassurance and, most relevant here, a fierce desire to control the partner's attention. When the partner is perceived as moving away, even just looking at someone else for a moment, the nervous system just panics. It demands closeness, demands the partner conform.
So Lucia knew the script before she even entered the play. She consciously tried to break the cycle by catching herself when the jealousy came up. She'd name it, "This is fear, this is not truth." They were actively fighting her own deeply wired pattern together.
They were. And that conscious effort is powerful, but, the body remembers what the mind tries so hard to forget. Despite that commitment, the jealousy came back, triggered by women like Petra and Ileana. And Eli, after decades of this, was just worn down. He became tired of the struggle, of having the same conversation over and over.
It's the exhaustion of fighting a ghost, and in that exhaustion, Lucia just reverts completely. She asks Eli to finally choose me, just me.
And this is where Eli, the quiet witness, becomes brutally honest. He points out the painful paradox. He tells her, "You want me to be broken so you don't have to feel alone in your hunger." He recognized that what she was asking for wasn't love. It was a shared imperfection to make him less threatening.
And the relationship ends, again, with Lucia confessing, "What you are is killing me."
Yeah.
She acknowledged that his fundamental nature, this openness, was just corrosive to her unresolved issues. It's a devastating insight.
It absolutely is. And it demonstrates a powerful psychological truth. Merely knowing the pattern, even diagnosing it as anxious attachment, is not enough to break it. These patterns, they live in the body, in the nervous system. It takes something far more disruptive than just cognitive awareness to achieve real, lasting change.
And that disruption arrives in the form of the ultimate real threat. Years after they separated, Lucia gets diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. And that confrontation with mortality, it just instantly dissolves all the imaginary fears she'd been fighting with Eli.
The contrast is just startling. Her realization is devastatingly simple, and she shares it with him. She says, "I wasted so much time worrying about whether you looked at some woman too long, and the whole time this was growing inside me."
The cancer diagnosis acts as the crucible. The energy that fueled her jealousy, her possessiveness, that constant frantic fight for control, It had nowhere to go when facing an undisputed physical fact.
Precisely. The fear genuinely fell away, burned up in the crucible of mortality.
Mm.
She achieved this new state of unconditional presence, described as being free, undefended, just the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that deep existential acceptance finally allowed her to meet Eli's openness without needing to collapse it or control it.
You'd think that's the happy ending, right? Lucia transformed, finally accepting Eli. But the source material throws us into what it calls the Great Reversal. And this is where the real lesson for Eli begins.
Yes. Years later, Eli, the seemingly inexhaustible witness, he suffers a massive crash. He's diagnosed with a severe unnamed chronic fatigue or burnout. It's an illness caused by constantly carrying the emotional weight of others. His doctor noted the stress he was under was just constant. Eli finally realizes the cost of his own operating system. He had been pouring out without pouring in.
This is such a profound moment. It just shatters the myth of his own invulnerability. The person who defined himself by his boundless capacity suddenly hits a very real, very physical limit.
And this is where the reversal is so critical. Lucia, the previously anxious and dependent partner, now has to step into the role of the stable, giving caretaker. She becomes the one offering the unconditional presence that Eli, in his collapsed state, desperately needs.
But Eli struggles immensely. He struggles to receive that care. He admits, I don't know how to receive. How do we even unpack that? The all-time giver being unable to take.
It's a deep-seated defense mechanism. For people whose identity is rooted in being the helper or the witness, receiving care means acknowledging a fundamental need and vulnerability. And Lucia, having been through her own crucible, she spots the mechanism instantly. She tells him, if you're giving, you don't have to feel your own need. His constant giving was a brilliant, lifetime-long avoided strategy.
Wow. He needed to be physically broken to learn his own capacity for dependence. He learns he is not inexhaustible and that he requires replenishment.
And they achieve an entirely new equilibrium. It's not based on getting rid of the old shadows, the fear and jealousy still come back sometimes, but on fighting those shadows together.
Yeah.
As a recognized pattern, a shared struggle. And this new foundation, it instantly impacts their professional lives.
The canteen becomes this place of transformation. Lucia joins Eli there, becoming a partner in the seeing. And she offers care specifically to those women who needed someone who understood suffering from the inside. She had the credibility of a survivor.
And Eli ages into an elder presence. He realizes he was never the center of the universe, but just a node in a network. But even as an elder, he still struggles with self-doubt. He questions if he's given enough.
And Lucia, now the voice of final wisdom, offers this beautiful resolution to that lifelong worry.
Yes. She tells him, there's no enough. There's just what you gave. And it mattered.
That reframes his entire life's work. Eli stopped believing his presence made any ultimate difference. He couldn't fix the world or save the women in the factory, but he realized perhaps the point was simply presence itself, the fact of being here, awake, available. That is such a radical shift from the pressure of output to the quiet power of simply being.
That transformation of purpose, that's his legacy. Eli dies peacefully, and Lucia's grief is described as clean. It's uncomplicated by the regret of time wasted on possessiveness. His lasting impact was the simple, radical act of seeing, confirming that while the pattern continues, the pattern is all there is. How we choose to live within that pattern is our ultimate choice.
So here's where we synthesize the lessons for you. This deep dive into Eli's life provides a really uncomfortable truth. Profound presence is not a universally welcomed gift. It's a catalyst. It forces a radical transformation, either into a new, hard-won capacity for unconditional love or into destructive, possessive fear.
And the key takeaway, especially in our hyperconscious world, is found in that great reversal. Eli, the master of giving, crashes spectacularly due to burnout. This teaches us that even when we are highly conscious, spiritual, and open, we still have physical and emotional limits. They demand structure and rest. True self-awareness isn't just knowing your psychological patterns, like Lucia knowing her anxious attachment. It's also knowing your fundamental physical needs for replenishment and boundaries.
Eli learned, terrifyingly late, that he couldn't keep pouring out without pouring in, even if that meant the terrifying act of turning inward and admitting weakness. So we leave you with this final provocative thought, something to mull over until our next deep dive.
If your goal is to live consciously, to break free from your own deeply wired destructive psychological scripts, what real-world consequence will be required to shock your system into seeing the truth? The way mortality shocked Lucia's fear into silence, do you have to face a figurative or perhaps even a literal collapse to stop fighting the imaginary threats in your life and start confronting the real ones?